Nietzsche and education. In many senses, it's a strange title for a presentation of Nietzsche-inspired ideas on education. What has this person got to do with education? We've heard of him as the spokesman for God is dead, will to power. He had a strong hatred for the masses, and yet the last 2 centuries have been focused on mass education. He was concerned with the individual. What I want to do is to try and develop some ideas that I've been working on for several years, myself and one of my colleagues. It's a Nietzsche-inspired educational project. Who was Nietzsche? 1844, he was born in Leipzig. He had several women or motherly influences in his childhood. Already when he was in his 20s, he became a professor of classical philology, but he gave up his post after only a few years. And then he begins to wander in nature around Europe, nature such as this, writing and developing his ideas. The Birth of Tragedy comes in 1872, perhaps the only book that is a kind of a connection of arguments, like a book. 1880s, he develops several other ideas in different books. I shall focus on 2 texts, Beyond Good and Evil and The Genealogy of Morals. In 1889, he stops speaking, becomes introverted, no longer talks. Perhaps it was syphilis, nobody really knows. 1900, he actually dies. He's been used by Nazi Germany. There have been numerous interpretations. He's been important for writers such as Jacques Derrida and Michel Foucault. But my concern is, specifically as an educationalist, how can we use and develop Nietzsche's ideas? Nietzsche's book, The Birth of Tragedy, 1872. Perhaps a strange title in many senses. But what he wants to do is quite simple. He wants to direct attention back to the old Greek times, and he wants to make a kind of criticism of modern society and its belief in knowledge and science and finding the answer to everything. And then what he does, he takes us back. He evokes 2 myths. The first, Apollo, god of form, structure, as in painting, where a painting should have a structure, it should have something you can identify. Of course, that's a bad discussion with abstract art, but he wasn't thinking of those kind of things. The other god that he evokes is Dionysus, the god of wine. And for him, it's the god that signifies life, a certain energy for life. We find it in music, in opera, it's a kind of the strength of the voice. It's a sign of life energy. And what he does, he says that tragedy was, broadly speaking, it came to existence when these 2 forces were joined together. Tragedy has a kind of a form, and it has a force with it, perhaps in the choirs that once were part of Greek tragedy. And he says that Greek tragedy, it can teach us something. It can teach us why we're here. It provides the existential answers to life. And while science, in natural science, can tell us why we breathe, how the voice works, how the heart pumps, it can't actually provide answers to our existential concerns. He carries his argument through his book and says that, of course, tragedy arose, but it also died. And how did it die? Through Socrates. Socrates, he stands for science and trying to find the answer to everything. And that's against this kind of aesthetic way of finding the meaning to life, which we get from tragedy. And there's always be a limit to science, says Nietzsche. It won't answer the existential